Does anyone know what time it is? May I survey the class? Does anybody know? It's Women's History Month. That's right. Couldn't even wait for anybody to answer. Sorry about that. I'm shooting this video on March 1st, which for me is the national holiday where I rewatch Jennifer's Body. Would love to know how you're celebrating too, but for me, as the daughter of Satan, the Antichrist herself, watching a movie about a succubus destroying the men in her high school is the perfect way to celebrate. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, rewind. Hi, I am the beloved cult leader of this channel. You can join us. All you have to do is click subscribe. No rituals involved, no brainwashing involved. By engaging with my content, you just kind of get to be one of Satan's little helpers. I have another channel too, as well as a Patreon and social media. Everything you need is linked down below, etc., etc. What I appreciate most though is when you click the like button and the notification bell. That way you never miss our next meeting. In today's meeting, I must discuss with you everything that I watched in the month of February. First, I get into the TV shows that I've been watching, and then we talk non-horror movies. Then I briefly go over my horror rewatches before getting into all my new watches of old horror. And then finally we get into new horror releases. So if that sounds good to you, grab a drink, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and let's jump right into it. I've still been watching It's Always Sunny. We watch it every here and there, so we've been watching it super slowly. We are now on season 4 though. And also for an update to my Buffy people, so I am over halfway through season 2 now, and I'm actually really enjoying it again. This is the first time that I've really kind of consistently been watching it. Usually I watch like, I don't know, maybe 5 episodes a week at this point. They're just long episodes, so it is a little bit difficult to get through, but I'm feeling much more invested. I'm loving the development of the relationship between Buffy and Angel. I'm loving also all the subplots with Angel. They're kind of going through it. It's getting really interesting to me. And I've also been watching the new season 3 episodes of Abbott Elementary. I love that show. Season 3, it's just as good as seasons 1 and 2. Really enjoying myself. Cannot recommend that show enough. But that does it for all the TV shows that I've been watching. Honestly, not a lot going on in that category. So moving on to non-horror. First up, we have The Fisher King. I had this movie on Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection, and also I'm trying to get through the entire filmography of Terry Gilliam. After shock jock Jack Lucas loses his job, he grows depressed and turns to booze. As he's about to hit rock bottom, Lucas meets a homeless man named Perry. Perry spends his days searching for the Holy Grail, and Lucas, feeling culpable for the poor man's plight, pledges to help him in his quest. I already talked about this pretty at length over on my second channel because I did end up getting rid of my Criterion Collection edition of that movie. I'm fine just watching it the one time. I don't want to rehash all my thoughts here, so I would recommend checking out that anti-haul. All I'll say here is that the bar for heterosexual romance was heavily frustrating me in that movie. Way too low. Way too low. Up next, I rewatched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Was kind of just in a Terry Gilliam mood that day. I have debated putting this in my Letterboxd top 4 because currently it is one of my favorites of all time. Perfect film, adore it. Next up would be the Back to the Future trilogy. I've talked about Back to the Future before on this channel, I'm sure. I typically rewatch it at least once a year. I think that I skipped it in 2023, so had to go for the full trilogy. Was showing it to my boyfriend. He had never seen them before. And you know what? I will talk about this. I don't think I've ever mentioned before how much I believe that Thomas F. Wilson was the one carrying that franchise. In the second movie, he plays either 4 or 5 different versions, 6 maybe, of Biff, and then he also plays Griff as well. Like, he was carrying that franchise on his back. I don't know what you want me to say. Also, I know that this is not the takeaway that I should have had from that trilogy, but I firmly believe that he should have become the next rom-com king of the 90s or something. Something about the way that he grabs the scruff of Marty's neck. I don't know. I just imagine all the terrible scenarios we see with him in Back to the Future, and I'm like, what if these were reframed? What if these were nice? Also, he's just tall. It's one of those things when you're a really tall girl, it's like, is he attractive or is he just tall? And sometimes you truly don't know. And that's why I finally realized why I'm not quite as big of a fan of the third movie of the trilogy, is because Thomas F. Wilson is like barely there. He really gets sidelined. And of course it's in favor of giving Doc and Marty a really nice character arcs. I like that we get to see so much more of Doc and that he's, he gets to have his romance. I love that, I do. But I think that I've just realized that a lot of the magic of the franchise is in Thomas F. Wilson. Next up though would be Self-Reliance. This is the directorial debut of Jake Johnson. This was just released, I think exclusively to Hulu. I'm pretty sure now it's branded as a Hulu original. Tommy receives an invitation to win $1 million by playing a game where he must outwit hunters attempting to kill him. He realizes the hunters can only attack him when he's alone, but none of his friends and family believe the game is real. This movie had a serious Mark Duplass type vibe to it. Really low budget budget and low on the effects, but very high in concept. Mark Duplass is the king of that, so I don't know. I thought that it was rather bold of Jake Johnson to try this right out the gate with his debut, especially because in Duplass's films, there's always something a little bit more profound underneath the surface going on. In Self-Reliance, there quite literally was no moral. At one point, he realizes, oh, maybe I did this because I want to be around people more often, but it doesn't have any type of impact, really. In playing this game, I guess he grows as a person. The character arc is very, very weak. I feel like there's a joke to be made about the real journey was the journey about the journey and nothing, and just the journey. What did I say? I think I came up with something a little more clever. Yes, I said it's not about the destination. It's not even about the journey either, apparently. It's just so flat. Like, somebody on Letterboxd said that it gave them thematic blue balls, and I was like, yes. Well, yes. It's a shame because it was a pretty good concept. And Jake Johnson, I think, is hilarious, though in this movie, he still very much felt like Nick Miller. So I don't know now how much of Nick Miller is actually just Jake Johnson, because I know that a lot of New Girl was improvised. I'm pretty sure this is the first project of his that I've seen since he was in New Girl, and that ended, when was it, like 2017? It had been a while, and I really, really enjoy his comedic sensibilities usually. I wasn't really laughing at Self-Reliance. I think that I laughed, I don't know, maybe like 3 times. I just couldn't really believe how underwhelming it was. I mean, for a movie where Andy Samberg rolls up in a limo and is playing himself, you'd think that it would be a little more exciting. And also there's people trying to kill Jake Johnson's character. It's pretty dull. It's really, really dull. I was super surprised. But if that's the bar that Jake Johnson is setting, he can really only go up from here. If that was conceptualized by him, that idea and the script and everything, then I do have hope that he'll go on to make better movies, I'm sure. Oh, and speaking of Back to the Future, Christopher Lloyd was also there for a few minutes. I think, you know what the problem is? Comedies can really pack an emotional punch if the filmmakers will allow them to. For example, in Superbad, there's like that really heartfelt scene where after the long night of partying, the two friends, you know, they're reconciling, and it's a sweet scene. And in that scene, it's a little more minimal on the comedy. The tone shifts a little bit. Whereas in Self-Reliance, there are these moments that I think are supposed to be taken a little more seriously, where there's supposed to be these really important character beats, but they're still played up exactly like all the more comedic scenes. Same thing with the moments that are supposed to be a little bit more high intensity, like when the hunters find him and they try to kill him. Everything tonally is just very, very flat, like meaning it's just tonally it's the same throughout. And that just was boring to me. So that's not one that I recommend. It was like a 2.5-star movie for me. Up next, we have The Lovely Bones. I finally caught up on my 2009 pop culture. After being brutally murdered, 14-year-old Susie Salmon watches from heaven over her grief-stricken family and her killer. As she observes their daily lives, she must balance her thirst for revenge with her desire for her family to heal. I wanted to catch up on this because I just remember when I was a kid, I was too young to go see this, but I really wanted to. And the way that people have talked about this movie in the last 15 years, you would think that it was the most traumatic movie in history. Even on Letterboxd to this day, people are like, Stanley Tucci gave me nightmares. Or people acting like this movie made them sob until the cows came home, darling. That's not a phrase. I enjoyed the book a lot because the book is a mess. It is a mess. Like the final, I don't know, the final 20 page, the final 2 chapters, it is madness. I can't even believe that went past an editor and they were like, yup, send it out. Send it out to the impressionable youth, stat. And they did, and it became a hit. So much so that Peter Jackson directed the adaptation. Oh boy, was he the wrong person to do this. The movie is dog shit, you guys. I will not be told otherwise. Oh my god. Almost nothing about the book was translated to the screen well at all. I feel like all the wrong messages from the book were also then stressed in the movie as well. There are so many sequences of Susie just like having a blast up in heaven. There's like giant ice cream or I don't know, stuff like that. Let me just tell you, that is not happening in the book. The book is so much more grounded. They're also, oh my god, the cast casting, I can't support. Saoirse Ronan was interviewed about this movie and talks about being 13, having to kiss, I think, a 20-year-old in one of the final scenes of this movie. Oh my, this movie just gave me the ick, the absolute ick. No, that's not all right, babes. That's not all right. What happened to child labor laws? Is there no protection for that? Anyways, the movie is just, it's a narrative mess. I don't know if it's a book that really would be translated super well to screen in any capacity, because in the book it's very much like stream of consciousness, and a lot of time will go by and then it'll slow down. Like the pacing of the book is really confusing. Not when you're reading it, but in terms of trying to adapt it, I would be like, I don't know where to start with this thing. So the movie ends up being an absolute mess with just nothing that I thought was actually kind of good about the book being translated. Also, if you want to know what made me crack up the absolute loudest about this movie, then go look at my Letterboxd review. It is a big spoiler though, so if you haven't seen the movie and you want to for some reason, then avoid that. Okay, next up we have Drive Away Dolls. This is from just one Coen brother, just the one. In search of a fresh start, two women embark on an impromptu road trip to Tallahassee, Florida. However, things quickly go awry when they cross paths with a group of inept criminals along the way. This movie was fun and it was cute. It's not good though, and I was really bummed about it because it seems like, I don't know, it felt like all the performances were good, but for how over the top all the performances are, I just don't think that the filmmaking really met it there. It tried to, but I think that it tried to in the wrong circumstances, because there are these really weird, like, psychedelic experimental film asides that are kind of like plopped throughout the movie. I couldn't really figure out the intention with that. Like, it still didn't make sense once I like understood what, you know, how it fit in narratively, because it's kind of like a reveal at the end. I wish that they had took some of that craziness and applied it to the entire film, because you have Margaret Qualley putting on what she thinks is a Texas accent. I don't know. I didn't like her accent in the movie. I think she's one of the most talented actresses of her generation, but I don't, her accent work was putting me off in this movie. Geraldine Viswanathan, I think she's such an underrated actress. I'm obsessed with her. I first saw her in Blockers, and then I loved her in the TV show Miracle Workers, and I'm glad that it looks like we're gonna start seeing more of her. Beanie Feldstein was great. I have no notes for her. The only thing is, with the over-the-top acting, I'm pretty sure that that's the direction that they were given, but then something about the vibe of it, like it wasn't connecting with that. The movie ended up being pretty mediocre, but for what it was, I enjoyed the intention of it. Also, in the little Google synopsis, they failed to mention that the two leads are lesbians. That's super fun. They get into a bunch of gay hijinks in the movie. So will I watch it again? Maybe eventually. If I find it on physical media and it's reasonably priced, then yeah, I would probably want to own it, but it'll be a while. I'm not gonna seek it out necessarily. Last up for non-horror that I watched would be Mary Shelley from 2017. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It just follows the life of Mary Shelley. It's a biopic of her teenage years through, I believe, her mid-20s. So it's around the time that she wrote Frankenstein and when Frankenstein became popular. This movie was just really drab. If you know anything about the life of Mary Shelley, then this was an extremely watered down version of it. It's good. I think if you are a gothic girly and you like the more sort of the whimsical, sort of fluffy, you know, the parts about gothic cinema, then I think that you probably really enjoy this one. It's also very heavy on the drama. However, I was a little bit bored. I was kind of like, but she lost her virginity on her mother's grave, you cowards. So what are we doing here? This is what we was just pretty disappointed with it overall. Elle Fanning was really great in it. She has a perfect face for this type of, you know, tortured poet thing. Tortured artist. She's really good at kind of holding her head up like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anyways, yeah, I don't know. It was a 3-star movie. It's good. It's well made. It's well acted. It's moody. It's not a waste of time. It's just, if you know anything about her life, or if you're a fan of her and her lore, I think you might be a little bit disappointed. Let's get on to horror though. Oh my gosh, time to talk about horror, and let's just quickly go through all my rewatches. First up, we did a watch along of Night of the Living Dead, and I'm hopefully going to be getting a deep dive of that out this month. We'll see, because right now I'm working on a deep dive of Jennifer's Body because, you know, women's history. And then I also have a Frankenstein deep dive coming up. So we'll see, but a deep dive of that will be coming out soon nonetheless. I also rewatched My Bloody Valentine on Valentine's Day, of course. That's my go-to. I rewatched The Roommate, which we'll talk about this. In another month or so, I will be releasing a video talking about the most unhinged moments from that movie and basically giving you guys a funny little plot breakdown. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that, because that one wow. Next up, I rewatched Frankenweenie because I am using this movie as inspiration for my own short horror film that is currently in production. We had our first weekend of shooting last weekend, so definitely check out the GoFundMe, donate, check out my Instagram, you can see some of the behind the scenes, and on Patreon you get to see a whole heck of a lot more. I rewatched The Invisible Man. I was showing this to my boyfriend for the first time, and we both really enjoyed it. This is my favorite directed film by Lee Wanell. I also rewatched Leprechaun. It's happening this year, you guys. In a couple of weeks you will get to see my Leprechaun ranking. And then finally, to cap off Black History Month, we did a watch along of Candyman. I love this movie. This was the first time that I really just became so smitten with Tony Todd. I was drinking on that watch along. I had not had a drink in quite a long time. And so rather embarrassingly, whenever Tony Todd was like, "Be my victim," I was like, would. But anyways, that's it for all my horror rewatches. Moving on to my new watches of old horror. First up, we have Neon Demon. This one I also did talk about at length on my second channel because I was getting rid of my DVD. I really disliked this movie. Jessie moves to Los Angeles just after her 16th birthday to launch a career as a model. The head of her agency tells the innocent teen that she has the qualities to become a top star. Jessie soon faces the wrath of ruthless vixens who despise her fresh-faced beauty. If you've seen the menu, this movie is trying to be that, except for the fashion industry, and it is failing miserably, let me tell you. This one came pretty heavily recommended to me, but I was glad to see when I went on Letterboxd that there were other reviews of people that felt the same way that I did. One of the top reviews was like a half-star rating, and they said something like, "I just don't think that men have the ability to tackle these kind of things with any nuance. I don't think they can meaningfully make commentary on the female experience." To that I do disagree, because I'm like, have you ever seen Ginger Snaps? Granted, a woman wrote that, so that, you know, that take that into account. But for the director of the Neon Demon, I think that might absolutely be the case. Because, wow, somehow majority of the villains in this movie end up just being the other women. And so of course it leans into the whole trope of catty women betraying each other. And you would think that, oh, maybe there's sort of a commentary about the internalized misogyny. No, because there's a scene in particular that makes very explicit commentary in the Neon Demon about the exploitative nature of the industry and how young girls will have to expose themselves and, you know, be put into dangerous situations just to advance their careers, to appease the male photographers, whatever. The movie is very blatantly trying to call out this aspect of the fashion industry. And then, like an hour later maybe in the movie, there is a scene of this movie doing the exact same thing. There is a scene where after these vixens commit a heinous act, we see a shot of them naked in the shower. There's no dialogue. It has nothing to do with anything. It's literally just this movie being extremely hypocritical. I was like, you are ridiculous. It's just dumb. I think it's a dumb person's idea of making a smart movie. Also, Keanu Reeves is there for like 2 minutes, and I don't understand why. That's gonna do it though. I already talked about this movie over on the second channel, so I'm gonna stop. Next up, we have The Wailing, and I can't get into this one either because this movie is gonna be for the first video of a new series called I Finally Watched. There are a lot of movies that I somehow have never seen in my life. The Wailing was one of them. Perfect Blue will be the next one in that little series. Pulp Fiction, Fight Club, the Mummy trilogy, those will all be part of that series as well. They're just movies that even though I literally have a degree in film, I somehow have not seen. So we're fixing that. Up next would be The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, and again, I already talked about this at length over on the second channel. This is the debut of Dario Argento. It is a giallo, and I just was fine having watched it the one time. I don't really see myself ever going back to it. I was really hooked by the opening 15 minutes, and then I got really bored. And the twist, because, you know, giallos they're full of twists, they just didn't really have any impact on me with this one for whatever reason. I don't know, but I'm a giallo girl. I'm really starting to get into them, so feel free to recommend any of them down in the comments below. I have a lot more Argento to get through, and I also want to get through a lot more like Mario and Lamberto Bava stuff too. Next up, we have the original Frankenstein trilogy, so Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. Weirdly enough, Son of Frankenstein ended up being my favorite of the original trilogy, but I feel like I'll need to give them a rewatch to say that definitively, because with Bride of Frankenstein, I just was so disappointed that she was only in like the last 3 minutes of the movie. I literally was booing. I was booing my TV, because when it ended, I was just like, that's it. Like I said though, I do have a deep dive coming up. I originally was going to be doing like a huge Frankenstein through the years deep dive, but then I became very overwhelmed by that. So I decided for Women's History Month, because I'm obsessed with Mary Shelley, I want to do a deep dive of Frankenstein through the 1930s. So I'll be covering the novel, the 1910 short film, and the original trilogy from the 30s. And then eventually I will work my way up and I'll cover more of Frankenstein. But I don't know how long that venture will take, but we'll get there because I am very obsessed with Frankenstein now. Next up we have Bad Hair. This is directed by Justin Simien. You probably also know him for directing the brand new Haunted Mansion movie that came out last year. In 1989, an ambitious young woman gets a weave in order to succeed in the image-obsessed world of music television. However, her flourishing career may come at a great cost when she realizes that her new hair may have a mind of its own. I want to try to check off all the movies in Justin Simien's filmography. I only have Dear White People left now. This one was just a total miss for me. Not total, I gave it 2.5 stars. Through the first half of the movie, I was really interested and I thought that it had a really good grasp on the commentary that it was trying to relay. It's about the professionalism of hair and, you know, the plight that Black women face. So conceptually, I was like, yes. But then again, it's a little bit similar to Neon Demon, where I think the only villains in Bad Hair were other Black women. So that just struck me as a little bit weird. Again, maybe internalized misogynoir, but the white men in the movie were all like very chill. Like I don't know, none of them really had that much to say. The main villain was the Black female executive that our main character was working for. So that was just like not really sitting right with me. And then when I went to go search up like reviews that were written by Black women, it seemed like they kind of agreed. There was one that was absolutely scathing. She had given it a 1/2-star review, so I was like, okay, yeah, let me read her whole review. I didn't agree with everything, but I did think it was well worth the read. Just the perspective was really interesting. She says, Simeon, from my vantage point, reflects Black men's own strange, thorny relationship to the beauty rituals of Black women and the intimate spaces in which they take place. Both the script and direction pathologize Black women's relationship with their hair, falling on tired tropes that frame wanting to get a relaxer or weave as a reflection of Black women striving for white acceptance and power. Although the villains shown throughout in the film are primarily Black women, which in itself is telling. I definitely recommend reading this whole article. It's on Vulture. I'll link it down below. I think she sums it up better than I do. Next up, we have Ty West's The House of the Devil. I had been looking forward to this one after seeing X and Pearl because people spoke really highly of it, and I wasn't crazy about X and Pearl. So I was like, you know, maybe this one will be better. Desperate to make some money so she can move into a new apartment, college student Samantha Hughes takes a mysterious babysitting job. When she arrives at the house, it immediately becomes clear that everything is not as it seems. There are definitely things that I have to commend this movie for because obviously with a budget of under $1 million, Ty West made a gorgeous film. It also looks like it came straight out of the 70s or 80s. The costuming and the hair, it's all very much on point. The way that it was shot and edited with the freeze frames, especially the title card, it definitely was transportative. Transportative? Anyway, that's about where my praises begin and end. Oh, and I loved Greta Gerwig in it. Greta Gerwig as the actress, so underrated. I wish that she was still acting, but of course we love her direction. I was really, really bored. There is so much of this movie, like 45 minutes of the runtime, where our main character is just walking around the house. Very much When a Stranger Calls remake coded. If you've seen this movie, oh my god. Boo! Boo! I swear to god, there is only about 15 minutes of that movie where that girl is not just walking around that mansion. Anyways, it just becomes so repetitive and so boring. And because the title of the movie is called The House of the Devil, and there is a title card in the very beginning that's like, in the 1980s, there was a very real satanic panic, blah, blah. You know exactly where it's going. I hadn't read up anything about the movie. I had never watched a trailer. I had never even heard of it before X and Pearl, but nonetheless, they just make it so easy for you to predict almost everything that happens. There are maybe 2 moments that I think might have your jaw on the floor. They weren't that impactful to me, to be honest, just because in both situations there was a decent amount of buildup to the shocking moment. So I knew that something was coming, and they just didn't get me. They really just should have been more discreet. They should have marketed this as something else. They should not have called it The House of the Devil. There should not have been that title card in the beginning. They could have put the title card at the end, and then it would have been like, oh, that's why he made this movie. But no, no, those choices were not made. So I'm good having only seen it the one time. It's not a bad movie. Like, it's maybe, do I want to say that it's worth watching? I just feel like you've watched movies with that subject matter that were better. So I don't know. That's the bottom line. I don't know. Let's move on. Other new watches of old horror. I have made my way through Leprechaun 1 through 4 now. Had never seen 2, 3, and 4. Now I've got those under my belt. I've only got 3 more to go. But again, I will be ranking that franchise for St. Patty's Day. Next up would be Gothic from 1986. I had to throw this on after watching Mary Shelley. On a warm summer night in 1816 at the Swiss lakeside chateau of Lord Byron, the poet and his guests spend the evening sharing ghost stories while under the influence of experimental compounds provided by the doctor. As the night goes on, reality and the horrific tales begin to commingle. This movie, I don't even know if I could tell you that it's good. It's just a wild ride. There was so much about it that I appreciated, and I just had to give the movie its flowers for being so off the wall. And that's really all that I could tell you about it. Like, I can't even really articulate my thoughts because there's just a lot going on. I just feel like the people that made Mary Shelley, maybe they saw this and they're prudish or something, and they're like, you know what the people really want? They would like this movie if we took out all the fun sex and alcohol and drugs. Yeah, that's what the people really want. No, Gothic was a blast. I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if it's good. It's not one that I would revisit frequently, but now I want to see if it's been released by a boutique physical media label, because I think that I watched it on Tubi, so it's easy to find, but it's one of those ones that I'm like, this better not get lost. I need to get my hands on a physical copy. I definitely recommend that one over Mary Shelley. Next up we have Perfect Blue, but like I said, this is going to be in my I Finally Watched series, so I'm not going to share my thoughts here. All I will say is that I am glad that I was not on an edible when I watched that one. And last up for new watches of old horror, we have Species. This is a real mid-90s gem. When government scientist Xavier Fitch intercepts a space transmission containing the genetic sequence for an alien life form, he uses it to produce Syl, a gorgeous alien-human hybrid. However, due to her rapid growth, when they try to extinguish her, she escapes. There's a lot more that goes down in this movie, and if you are used to the more sanitized cinema of today, then this one might be a tough pill to swallow, because it's wild. I had a blast with it. In fact, for like the first half of the movie, I was thinking that I was gonna give it 5 stars, because I was like, fuck it, you know? I'm having fun. I enjoy sci-fi action movies. Let's do it. But then I had to reckon with the fact that it really is not a perfect film. Far from it. However, it is still so fun. Maybe it falls in the realm of being so bad it's good, especially because in the third act, you really just feel the 90s of it all. There are some really good practical effects, but then they're also mixed in with some of the worst CGI you've ever seen in your entire life. So that made the final act a little bit less exciting. Usually, if something feels like a time capsule to the period, I can forgive that kind of stuff. And for the most part, I could. But because it was also mixed in with so many amazing practical effects, I was like, they should have just done that for the whole thing, you know? Also, it just goes so far off the rails. And maybe I'm just a little sensitive to that stuff, because while I am desensitized to most stuff in horror, the more sexual aspects of this movie were kind of a lot, but it just was fun. I just had a blast with it. I was like, you know what, 3.5 stars. I don't care if it's bad. I own it on a little clippy DVD, and I would 100% watch it again. It also was like a weirdly empowering movie. One of the most famous dialogue exchanges from this movie has been quoted to death on Letterboxd, but the scientist is like, we decided to make it female so that it would be more docile and compliant. And one of the other non-scientists they brought in is like, more docile and compliant? I guess you don't get out much. Cause, yeah, girl power. It weirdly it had a really good feminine perspective, in my opinion. This alien girl, she just wants to walk around and buy clothes and find men to mate with. She didn't ask to be born, and all these scientists are like trying to track her down and kill her. Like, just leave her alone. I've heard the franchise kind of tanks after the first one, which I can imagine because it's not like the first one is the peak of cinema, but I don't know. I'm not gonna seek out all the sequels immediately. I've got more pressing things going on, but maybe someday for the patrons, I would do a ranking of that franchise. Let me know if any of them are worth getting into. Finally, we have to talk about new horror releases, and the only 2 for this month are Lisa Frankenstein and Out of Darkness. And Out of Darkness is listed as a 2022 film. However, I went and I saw it in theaters. So I am gonna qualify it as a 2024 release because it just hit theaters. However, I'm not really gonna talk about these movies today because I'm gonna direct you to other content. I'm sorry, it's been really dry for horror. This month is when things are finally gonna get shaken up. There's like, I think 4 different theatrical releases. There's at least 1 major streaming horror release this month too. So don't worry, the well shall filleth again. It will no longer be dry. But Lisa Frankenstein, I did do a solo review on this channel, and Out of Darkness, I did a solo review over on the Patreon. Both videos contain a spoiler-free section as well as a spoiler-filled section, so go have fun, go crazy, go watch those. That's gonna do it for today. I'm sorry that I don't have more new horror releases to talk about with you, but I hope that you had fun nonetheless. Once again, I will shout out the Patreon and my second channel and my other social media, as well as the GoFundMe for my current short horror film. The second weekend of shooting is coming up in another 3 weeks. We could definitely use the help, especially in terms of our post-production budget. So do check out Somnum. That'll be linked down below. That is my first short horror film. You can see what I'm capable of with like 0 money. And now we have a much higher budget, so I'm moving up in the world. I hope you have fun checking that out as well as my other content, but more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!